Well, I haven't got the answer. I mean, one thing that comes with masculinity, or if you like, the sort of definition, or the old definition, is power. And, you know, in a lot of these war zones, if you like, if I could choose to look at some of these very patriarchal societies where there's war, it's kind of dog eat dog. And I think this is going to sound maybe too simplistic, but I think a lot of men act out on women because they can. And so, you know, if we look at kind of soldiers, if we look at, I mean, a lot of stuff has been written about the Vietnam War and the way people behaved, and the Iraqi War and the Afghan War, the way men behave with men, and then the way men behave with women. Now, sex contributes, again, to feeling powerful. Now, I don't know why men rape women in the ways they do. I've got no idea. But I think there's something about, at its basic, it's like men want to feel powerful in those situations. There's competition, and of course there's huge pressure for men to behave in ways they don't want to behave. I mean,
really, that's a really interesting kind of approach, because what I find in schools, which is where kind of this stuff develops, it's like the embryonic stages of misogyny and sexism, is when boys berate other girls and they use derogatory terms to refer to them. So what I do now is I've kind of developed a dynamic and a relationship with the youngsters where you can turn around and, without being too didactic, turn around and say to them, all right, my man, just hold tight there. Why? When you ask a child, why is she this? Why is she that? And you keep probing further and further back, most oppression is illogical. It lacks substance. So they'll hit a wall, bang. And when they hit that wall, they're forced to actually have to address their own prejudice and their own systems of oppression. So you just keep probing into that child. Why is she this? Why did you call her? Where did you learn these ideas from? Because I know when you were 4, you definitely didn't think like this. So something happened. Tell me about this. And you put it in their court, they don't know what to do. And they're left feeling slightly silly, but in the sense where it's enough to kind of pull them back. And women are affected by patriarchy as well. Other women refer to other women in particular ways, and you do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And you keep tracing it back to its root, and there is no root. It's an idea. It's an abstract thing that humans have created to mess each other up. So when you go back to that fundamental flaw, you find there's nothing there. And the kids just look at you like, and it works. I've seen it work. I've seen groups of boys that are now in year 10 that I've worked with from year 7 turn around and say, dude, don't say that. Amongst each other. Like, just even if the word batty man, don't say that. Don't say that. And literally, not because I'm there, but because it's part of their thinking now. It's a conscious part. So it works. It's just having to have these conversations and having a language, like what Ekow was saying, giving young boys and young girls the ability to say, you can be verbose, you can be articulate, you can use multisyllabic words and express these thoughts that are taking place in your head. Don't think it's just for Stephen Fry, it's for everyone. I mean...
But, you know, the business of patriarchy is very interesting. It's kind of risen up. I was talking to a woman friend who's the same sort of age as me and who was involved, you know, at the same time as me in the 70s in the women's movement, saying, you know, we talked about patriarchy. We were trying to understand what it was that was going on and why it was that you know, women kind of, and the women bought into it was because they'd been sold this stuff for so long themselves. And so that women, you know, would, you know, talk about other women in denigrating ways and as being, you know, sluttish and all that sort of stuff, and still do. And so what was all that about? Why were women colluding in this stuff? And it was about the power of how cultures are created to serve the interests of a particular section of our world. And that business is not understood well enough. Go off and read about hegemony and understand the business of patriarchy, because we spent a whole lot of time in the 70s talking about this, but then it disappeared because it was a word that men didn't like.
So if you're seeing men at the top, yet you inside feel very small, it's going to create a psychosis which you then take out on the people that you feel are closest to you. Because those dudes with the temper won't act like that in court. They won't act like that towards their boss. They only do it to people that they feel they're allowed to do it, and it goes back to ownership and control again. Yes.
Very interesting.
It's very complex because I mean relating back to the personal stories. I was born illegitimate in the days they called it illegitimate. But the person who married my mother, who got my name, Campbell, was a very violent man, and he actually beat my mother when she was younger. And there's a lot of violence in my family. And one of the things we used to do, was we used to beat each other up as teenagers. It was a kind of almost a way of rehearsing our toughness amongst ourselves in order then to be able to be tough on the streets when we were out there in the streets as teenagers. When I actually went to live with my family itself, I wasn't brought up with a family at the same time. But my heterosexual brothers were always blaming their girlfriends. Always blaming, and I mean, one is now in a very bitter contest with his soon-to-be ex-wife. I've never really understood it. As someone who takes, and talking about young people, one of the things I talk about is taking personal responsibility with my 14-year-old. But the idea of not taking responsibility is something that is very challengeable, and Anthony's got more experience in terms of education. But I think it's something that we need to have that kind of dialogue constantly with. And it's not just young boys. There happens to be a lot of young women who are buying into that notion as well. And I think it's something that I personally don't understand, but I think the kind of conversation is also part of the conversation that might be happening in the family. What's permissible in the family? What's permissible in terms of the examples led by the generations in the family? And I think that's something, there's a key there.
I think that, in a way, I think you have to create a more, well, you don't have to, I'm not trying to put it back on you, but there's a possibility actually to kind of create a more imaginative, attractive space, which is that places like this I think are really interesting. Like, all the things that have been said within kind of fourth wave feminism at the moment, all the kind of figures that are coming to the fore are actually a more attractive place to be. The dialogues and debates that are taking place amongst women are more interesting, vibrant, dynamic than many of those tired, snipey kind of points that are put by some men around that. I think some of the countering of that is about actually doing your thing and actually making that feel as alive and as open and as curious about the world as possible.